We're uh, we're in the airport actually, and the between flights, we're headed to Omaha for Open the Heavens and for a Flashpoint event there. We just finished Flashpoint tonight, a special program, obviously in memory of Charlie, but also to discuss how the church should respond, how we as individuals should respond, how patriots should respond. So Reagan and I are uh, actually just going to sit here and share some thoughts with you before we run catch our connecting flight. Honestly, because I prefer to grieve together than separately. And a friend of mine, Tex McDonald, texted me right before I was going live on Flashpoint to check on me and asked me how I was doing, and that was when it hit me. I guess I've never really realized what it feels like to grieve. I mean, I've had death in my family and death in people, where it's expected almost because they're older or whatever, and that's sad, but that's different. This feels like true grief because I mean, I'm on the plane coming here and I can't even stop myself. I'm just sitting there listening to music, trying to calm down and start crying. So anyway, I know many of you are feeling the same way, and I just thought, it would be better to talk talk through some of this together. And we went live right when it happened because we wanted to get everybody praying for Charlie. And the videos that have come out since then make it pretty obvious um, that the enemy wanted to silence Charlie Kirk's voice. One of the guys said that tonight on Flashpoint. I mean, that even the symbolism of being shot in the throat like that. Um, I thought one of the best things tonight on Flashpoint was the, almost every single one of us had something about Stephen and Acts, and the fact that it hit me on the plane here that he was young. He was in his early 30s. The scholars believe 30 to 40, somewhere in there, early 30s. Charlie Kirk, 31, a voice of truth, and that the enemy hated. This is what Dutch said tonight. It was interesting. Everybody had something to say about Stephen. None of us knew what the other ones were going to say, and didn't even know. Anyway, bottom line is because he was giving the history of the children of Israel and showing how that led to Christ, they hated him and they were gnashing their teeth. They were so angry. And Dutch reminded us of that tonight on Flashpoint. And it made me think, even tonight in Congress, they asked for prayer for Charlie Kirk's family. And the Democrats were gnashing their teeth. They were literally yelling out things against saying no to even praying for Charlie Kirk's family. And I thought, that's it. I mean, that's the comparison. And Charlie was that powerful of a voice. And, we've been blessed to work with Charlie and do projects with Charlie. And um, I said this when we were praying earlier in the tavern. When we brought the whole campus together to pray for Charlie, that this was a guy that had so much influence and power and fame at a young age that if I were betting, I would have bet nobody that young can handle that. He's going to go off the rails. He's going to, I had a young pastor when I was a kid that had a church that went from 200 people when we started there to 10,000, and he was in his early 30s, late 20s when he started it, and early 30s, and it's just too much, too young to I don't think I could. I mean, even as a young legislator in my late 20s, I think it was too much for me at the time, and pride set in some of those ways. Not with Charlie, man. He somehow, and I think a lot to do with Rob McCoy being his pastor and his mentor and his friend, Jack Hibbs, being around those kind of awesome men of God had a lot to do with it, in my opinion, at keeping him humble. He was willing to listen. He was teachable. I remember him even saying, I don't think you were in the room, Reagan, but he came down to our area 2 years ago to do a dinner for the Tea Party, Fredericksburg Tea Party, and I was emceeing and asking him questions during interviewed him on stage basically for the crowd. And before that, we had a reception, and it was these young kids at the reception. They were like high school and college kids that had come over, and he wanted to meet them. And one of them asked him something about what how do they play, it was something to the effect of, how does he deal with the opposition and people saying things about him and the threats and all that kind of stuff. And he literally said, he said, when those kind of people criticize me, and all, it doesn't mean anything to me. But he said, he looked over at me, he said, but if Rick Green calls me and says you should have done this different, or, I think you were wrong on that, he said that would totally make me pause, and I would want to listen, and I would want to learn. And I thought that really meant a lot to me, first of all, because he's so much more, has way more influence than I do. But I think he was appreciating my gray hair, maybe, and the battles that I had been in. And but I know, and that he was that way with Rob and with Jack and with all these people that were much closer to him than I was. Anyway, I just think I'm just so thankful that he was able to stay true in that way. And I'm sure he had his moments, right? We're all sinners and depraved and wretched, and I'm sure there'll be people that'll say, yeah, but I saw him lose his temper. I saw, and I don't know, I've never heard anybody say that, but they might, or he was prideful about this or that. You know what? Look at the fruit. Look at the fruit. And so I think the other thing I wanted to convey to our family, our tribe, uh, of Patriot Academy family, is that the result of this has to be a deeper dedication on our part to be like Charlie, from the standpoint of being willing to put his life on the line. Talk about lives, fortune, sacred honor. He put his life out there every time. I said this on Flashpoint a few minutes ago, so if you were watching, I'm sorry for repeating. But he knew, even with the 5 or 6 security guys he always had around him at these events, there's no way that you can prevent someone that really wants to take you out from planning and knowing where you're going to be, with your schedule being publicized. I mean, we all know this when we get death threats and we're out in the public square and we go to a public meeting, that there's only so much you can do, and at some point it's in God's hands. And Charlie always had a peace about that. You could tell the joy and the love that he showed in those public settings, with people spewing vitriol at him, and him turning around and loving them with truth. you know um and then to constantly be smiling, and in that environment where he knows he's at risk, they can only do so much. That's putting your life on the line. That's living and dying for the truths of Christ. And it's because he loved truth, and he was willing to stand there and take whatever he had to say, and iron sharpening iron, civil discourse. How many times have we said it at Patriot Academy? Civil discourse or civil war? We do not want civil war. The left wants civil war. This is how they act. This is their way of trying to persuade, kill the opposition, not us. And we will not respond in that way. We will respond. We will certainly take precautions and be ready to defend. This makes us think a whole lot more about all those death threats that we've been getting over the last 2 weeks. The level of vitriol against Patriot Academy that's just ramped up in the last 10 days is off the charts. So there's something going on in the spiritual realm towards the people of God, and towards those who are not just saying God's name, but living out God's word in the culture, that are actually a threat to Satan and his minions. That's the one. Those are the ones that have stirred up, I believe, a demonic spirit out there, a very um, evil spiritual battle that's going on. And so, pray for a hedge of protection around President Trump, around all of those people that even all the people that are going to be on Flashpoint tomorrow night, and just all the people that have been willing to stand up and speak truth. The pastors. I mean, we had Russell Johnson on our Flashpoint broadcast last night. And Russell just got all kinds of death threats. This is that pastor up in Seattle. I don't know if you know Russell or not, but because he's been speaking out for Israel. And they killed one of his guys. They murdered one of his members about a month ago. Did you see that? I don't know if you saw that or not. Now, the guy was a former gang member and rapper and all this stuff, and he'd given his life to the Lord a few months ago and was bringing people to the Lord. I mean, it's a really powerful story. And he was martyred. And then they started threatening this pastor, and so he's had to go into hiding, not hiding, but had to move his family. And he said, "I'm not going to hide. I am going to get up and preach on Sunday mornings." And anyway, I'm just saying there's something happening right now that we need to come against.
Yeah, I mean, the whole message is that politics is not void.
Hang on a second. I don't think it's picking up your
For kidding
voice.
me,
Yeah, I
how do
was
we do
just.
without these?
Let's see. It's going to echo a lot, but yes, let's do that.
Did we just jump right back in?
It might be a separate record or a separate deal, but anyway, all right, y'all let us. I think you can hear us now.
Everybody's still on.
Maybe the chat will stay too. Hopefully, we didn't lose all your chat comments because we were going to go back and answer questions. But go ahead, man.
No, I was just going to say. I mean, this. People were saying immediately that this is obviously a political targeting attack. This is a political assassination, and yes, that's true because it's first and foremost a spiritual attack. I mean, you can't eliminate the spiritual nature of things like this. Charlie was political because he was first spiritual, and his belief, his relationship with the Lord led him to be so politically active, because when you're spiritually minded like that, you have to be. You can't help but be involved in politics. Aristotle saying politics is the highest form of community, combining morality and sociability. That's a spirit. That's all biblical. That's all spiritual.
You can't do that without it being spiritual.
You can't do that without involving the spiritual nature of life. I mean, life is spiritual. Politics is not a materialistic world. It's a spiritual world.
Yeah.
And so this being an attack on Charlie politically, it just speaks to, like you're saying, the dark nature that our country finds itself in right now, and the rising. I just think of the way yeast in bread, like sin in us, just right. You're seeing the darkness come up right now because it's starting to be exposed, but it's starting to just make way as much as it can. It's trying to do as much damage as it can, because we are seeing revival in our country towards what is good and what is holy. And I just think I've been journaling today and just putting down thoughts, and everything in my flesh just wants to strangle the man that did this, the person that did this. But we as Christians have to submit ourselves to the truth of God that says vengeance is His, it is not ours.
Yeah.
And I just think of King David multiple times that he could have taken Saul's life, and out of self-defense. He would have been, like, in any court today, David would have been totally justified in a cave with Saul and taken his life. But he said, no, I can't take the life of the Lord's anointed. And we have to keep in mind that God numbers everyone's days. Charlie's day was today, and it's not our job to enact vengeance in a rage-filled way. It's our job to act in self-defense of our lives, protecting our lives, but not to take the role of what God's job is in this world. But I want.
But that's also why He gave us government.
Absolutely.
Because government doesn't bear the sword in vain. So it's 100% government's responsibility to put this man to death, right? That shot Charlie. I mean, no question, this is a death penalty situation.
Yeah.
And that is part of the problem in the whole culture, right? This girl being murdered on the train is a direct result of people wanting lax policies, easy bail, put the criminals back on the streets. This guy had been arrested 14 times. And then, of course, the leftist racism that does rage, and that is a revenge rage for stuff that happened 400 years ago against people that didn't even do it. That's what led to the whole BLM thing that created the hatred for between races and all of that, and so that's what we don't want to play into. We don't want to be part. We have to respond as Christians, and so I think there's a physical piece to this where Christians have to wake up and start training and start being prepared to fight and defend against self-defense, literally in the moment, be able to stop a perpetrator from harming you or your family. And we just need to realize that there's a lot of people out there that want to do harm to people like us. That's why we're getting all these death threats now at Patriot Academy. But that is so different. Self-defense, just like the people at Lexington that, Pastor Jonas Clark had taught them. Don't fire, as Captain Parker said on that line, unless fired upon. You have to respond in defense. So don't let all of this cause you to be walking around looking for a chance to do violence. That would be the worst thing you could do as a Christian. I think that's your point.
Absolutely.
We're not to be in violence.
We can't retaliate by making statements in the same thing, in the same way.
Right.
But I just was thinking, because I don't know if I've ever experienced grief either, like you're explaining it, and I really feel like, wow, I actually am grieving for the loss of a life that I never even met this man, and he didn't know who I was, and didn't even know I existed, and yet I just feel this heaviness of something so unexpected and so wrong, and yet was a part of God's will, that only in the way God is going to make happen, the goodness is going to come out of this in only the way He can. But what I've just been wrestling with and praying through is, how do we keep joy in the midst of grief? Because feeling the grief that I felt today, I just think of that video of Charlie's daughter running up to him, and I have a little girl that's 1 year old.
Mm-hmm.
I can't imagine not coming home to her.
Yeah.
But how do you keep joy in the
Right.
midst of grief like this? And I think of Hebrews 12:2 says, looking to Jesus, the founder and perfecter of our faith, who for the joy set before him entered the cross.
Wow.
And, Jesus went to the cross with joy the whole time because of what he knew he was accomplishing for us. And Charlie wasn't expecting to lose his life today. But the whole time, I know he had joy doing it because he was in the Lord's will.
And I think that also requires a definition of joy. Joy doesn't mean smiling and being happy necessarily.
No, you can have joy in grief even.
That's right. That's right. It's a settled peace that what you're doing is actually going to end in good, and that it's actually going to be in God's will, and that all things truly do work together for good for those who love the Lord and are called according to his purpose. So even as we're grieving and crying and weeping, and literally grieving, that there is a peace in knowing that Charlie was doing what he was called to do, living and literally dying for the Lord and for his country and for these principles. And I think that's a tough lesson for us to be able to get our hands around. But that's also, that is carrying on the tradition of the founding fathers and people throughout our history that had that same mind. The martyrs, even going back to any martyr, because really, I think it was Dutch or Hank or somebody tonight on Flashpoint that said, Lance, he said he's a martyr. This isn't just a victim or a murdered person. This is truly a martyr. He died for his faith today.
Yes.
Because had it not been for his faith, he would not have taken the positions that he did.
Yes.
And been willing to stand against evil and people that hated the Bible and hated God.
Yes, and I think of the greatest movements of the faith have been off the backs of martyrs, and there's just something about a martyrdom that moves us and shakes us to our core.
Right.
John Calvin was shaken from his religious stupor because of watching a man being burned at the stake, singing praises and love songs to God while he was dying. And look at what he went on to accomplish and move a nation towards the gospel truth. So everybody on Flashpoint was right tonight in that there's going to be thousands of Charlie Kirks raised up because of this.
Yes.
And as we were talking about this earlier, it's like how has he done this as one man essentially this whole time? And it's just been remarkable for him to do that and to watch him do that. But it's been like, how is he going to keep doing this as one person? And it just sounds crazy to say, but maybe this is God's way of multiplying and handing off his legacy and influence to other people to make it greater. And I hate for that to be now in his absence, but ultimately it's going to be. It's
what we should all want. That God would take whatever we do, and when it's our time to go to heaven, multiply it among those who we've been able to teach. And that's exactly the vision. The image that I had was, literally thousands of Charlie Kirks as a result of this. He accomplished more in 31 years than the next 10,000 people do in their whole life combined. Right? It's remarkable what God did through him. But I do I think of all of the. I'm literally seeing certain Patriot Academy graduates of ours that are like ready to step into these kinds of roles. Mm-hmm. And in my mind, I'm thinking, I know how this is going to cement their purpose. It's going to make them want to carry that
think
torch.
Of all the seeds that Charlie's planted in people across campuses across the country, and now seeing this in them. Jesus said the same thing to his disciples when he talked about a seed is first planted in the ground and dies before it bears fruit.
Oof.
And he was talking about his death and bearing fruit of his resurrection. And now all the seeds that Charlie's planted in people over the years. Think about it now, that is just watered in the conviction that he walked in. And seeing that he was really willing to lay down his life for what he believed in. And all the people that actually got to speak with him on a mic are probably now watching this and thinking, oh my goodness, I'm reconsidering things that he believed and I believe, and hopefully just.
Well, that was. Were you listening when I think I can't remember if we turned the audio off, but Lance was talking about how that was probably part of what God used to turn Paul, because he's standing there holding the coats right as they're stoning Stephen, so he's clearly endorsing it at the time.
Yeah.
And then you have to imagine later how much that, once he had his road to Damascus moment, how much he probably looked back on that moment, and that moment burned within him.
Absolutely.
Right? To make his passion even that much greater, to think Stephen was speaking truth, and I supported his death, and yet now I realize what an amazing, thing that was, that he was willing to speak truth and quite literally be smiling as they finished killing him.
And not just supporting it. Said they looked to Saul and he approved. Like he was Gamaliel's number one apprentice. He was the man there that was essentially running the whole thing. And so for him to then look like, I didn't just support it, I essentially made that happen.
Yeah.
And now, I think of the reunion of Paul and Stephen in heaven.
Man, go ahead.
I was just gonna again encourage you guys that we can still have joy in the midst of grief, and that in a loss like this, we shouldn't think that grief is a bad thing either. There is a time to grieve, right? There's a time to mourn, but there's never a time to give up joy. There's never a time to set aside joy. So even when we're grieving, and right now in this moment grieving for Charlie and his family, we can still maintain that joy in the hope that he had and that we should have in the eternal salvation of Christ.
Yeah, I don't know if, I'm saying this off the top of my head, but it seems right that the opposite of joy would be despair. And so that's what we're saying not to
hopelessness.
do. Hopelessness, despair.
Yeah.
That if you have joy, even when it's tough, even when it's ugly, even when it's snot slinging grieving, right? You're not in despair. You're not grieving because you think all is lost and there is no good outcome. You're grieving over the pain of that person or that moment, or that particular pain in life, but you can grieve and know, I don't know how you're going to do it, God, but I know you're going to use this. And we can actually already see how God's going to use this, right? This is not like this, how in the world is he going to turn this and use it? You can literally see how God will use this to grow Charlie's legacy, meaning a biblical legacy, meaning the gospel, meaning teaching truth, meaning all those young people actually going out. Think of all those kids, all those young people that have been through one, like you're saying, that he's touched, that have been to Amfest or gone to or worked under Charlie or been a Turning Point Faith representative or whatever. And this will embolden them to just double down. And it should cause all of us to double down. I know getting these death threats the last 10 days, when I share them with people and I say, look, man, this is what they're saying about us, this is what they say they want to do to us, it makes people want to help. It makes people want to double down and say, not on my watch, I'm coming alongside you. And so I think that will be the legacy here. That's what martyrdom does.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Man, I have no idea what tomorrow is going to hold, but
Amen.
We are going to wake up still praising God for his goodness. And just doubling down on what we're doing. And thank you guys for all supporting the Patriot Academy and the movement that we got going on, and trying to set captives free, right? To teach free people how not to become captive. Because again, this all comes back to the spiritual war that we're in. And if this is not a wake-up call to put your life in the right perspective of what is most important. Imagine if Charlie wasn't a believer, right?
Yeah.
Imagine if he had no hope of eternity, if he was a devout atheist, and like the real grief and sadness we would have,
when
the loss of a soul, in that way. But
and it's such a good reminder. Somebody texted me this today. None of us know how long we have, and I know that's so cliche, and everybody says that when a young person dies, but it does make you go, man, I need to make the most of what God's given me, because he may take me tomorrow, he may take you tomorrow. If that happens, I want to know that I did today everything I could do to further his kingdom, and that I did not squander what he had given me. I didn't store up treasure on earth, I stored up treasure in heaven by using what I've been given here. So, all right.
And what I just love and respect about Charlie is that he didn't let the business, the politics truly become number one in his life, or take him away from his family, from the Lord.
Right.
We'll be out in a minute.
we got to go. Our time is up.
Yeah.
We got to go catch our flight.
But hug your kids, kiss your wives and husbands, and thank God for another day with them.
Amen.
Because it's a blessing.
Amen. All right, guys. Well, hey, be sure to tune in for Flashpoint tomorrow night. I think that's going to be a special time. All right. So we'll see you guys. Have a good one. And hey, be praying, not just for, I know we're all already praying for Charlie and Erica and the family. Pray for that whole Turning Point team, because they're going to be in really wondering what to do for the next few weeks and months. And so just pray for God to just descend on that whole situation. All right, God bless.
See you guys.